Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's Dr. Brad Reedy with Evoke Therapy Programs. This is Evoke's podcast and broadcast. Today is Thursday, December 8th, 2022. If you're new to this format, once every other podcast or every other broadcast, I should say, once every other broadcast, we have a live Q&A. So participants, alumni of our wilderness therapy program and also our intensive program are invited to come on to ask any questions. We also allow or invite you to invite family and friends if you want to. You can invite siblings. We want everybody to have access to this information. So you're welcome to share these links with them ahead of time if you have some close family and friends that you would like to join and like to give access to this. Before I begin with that, you can submit questions at any time. But before I begin with that, I'm just going to go ahead and re-announce our parenting workshop coming up on February 24th. We're going to be doing our third installment of the Conscious Parenting Workshop. This is online, 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We keep it relatively small so that it can be not just a lecture with me teaching and talking more, because you have access to the books, you have access to the library of archived broadcasts and all the podcasts, but this is really going to be interactive. It's an opportunity for you to ask specific questions about your specific challenges and have a dialogue with me during the broadcast. So if you're interested in that, I'm looking forward to hosting that third session. All right, let's get with the pre-submitted questions. You can submit questions at any time. You can always submit questions to webinar@evoketherapy.com in advance, and I'll be happy to take those first in the queue. Let's go with the first questions. It's a little bit of a long one. Part one, my almost 18-year-old daughter graduated from Evoke this past February. She did well there, although she did not write to me for 10 weeks. Since she has been home, it has been one step forward, two steps back. These past couple of months, she has really struggled, yelling, cussing at me. She recently got angry and kicked one of the potted plants down. I try to support her, but she cannot put 2 days together before she is angry and lashes out. What I am struggling with is that she immediately put this blame on me right after she lashes out. If you hadn't done this, if you hadn't done that, and there's no reasoning with her. 2 nights ago, she got angry, punched the car window, ran inside, locked me out of the house. My husband came home, tried to get in, and she started punching him. Police were called and they settled on taking her to my mom's, but said next time she's going to big girl jail. They have been called for this a few times before. So now she is no longer welcome at our house. I am saddened, however. I just can't live like this anymore. We can't afford any more placements, and we are out of ideas. I know I need to hold boundaries. She does not drive, does not have a job, and will probably not graduate high school due to absences. How can we help those almost adult kids who cannot see their actions are destroying families and themselves? Their mental illness puts the blame on everyone else now that not what they are doing. First of all, when I get a question like this, I just want to pause for a moment and offer my compassion and empathy for you. That sounds very difficult. There are not many people who have to deal with the level of disruption and drama and trauma that you're describing here. So my heart goes out to you. If I didn't have to answer this question, I would just simply ask more questions and tell you how sorry I am that you're going through this. The question is, how can parents of these almost adult children help? And it sounds like you're doing it. Part of validating her blame of you is your guilt, um, that might tell you to justify, to argue, to debate, to to give legitimacy to her accusations by setting boundaries, by setting, in this case, a very clear boundary because it rose to the level of violence and police involvement. You're giving it back to her. You're giving back to her her own responsibility. One of the most important, and there are a few, of course, but one of the most important things a parent can do is show the child that they can take care of themselves and that we're not compromised by our guilt. Part of our patterns in families comes out of our own guilt, not being enough. We were raised in families where we were supposed to please our parents, and that was an indication that we were doing well. And then we grow up, many of us, to be people pleasing people and ultimately children pleasing people. And what that means is we identify, we over identify with their complaints and their pain. I am absolutely confident you have compassion, confident that you in your heart of hearts would love to be together with her and would love to share the same roof. But by setting the boundary, by following through on the boundary, you're giving it back to her. Now, does that guarantee This is the key. This is one of the keys. Does that guarantee that she's going to get it? It absolutely does not guarantee it. But it just shows and models for her that you're going to take care of yourself and that you deserve to be treated well. The shift, folks, from codependency to codependency recovery is a shift from I'm going to try to figure out how to set boundaries and respond to try to control you. We don't think of the word control, but to flip the right switches to motivate you, to encourage you to change. So it's the shift from that to this is what I need to be okay. But we codependent people are find it so difficult to focus on ourselves first. Find it so difficult to secure our own mask. I was talking to a client not too long ago, and they were asking for an adage to help them through some of the difficult things that they were going through with their son. And I said to them, you got to channel selfishness. You're extending yourself. You're hoping. You're pleading. You get in arguments and fights with your son to try to convince him that what he's doing is wrong. But really, the boundary of I'm not going to take this anymore, and this is what I need is really what he needs. And lastly, I know this is almost a trick of the mind, but the best way to help your children, this is for all of you, the best way to influence your children for good is to not try to influence your children for good in a sort of way of thinking. I think it's the chapter heading of the chapter on behavioral change in the journey of the heroic parent, my first book, and I was quoting Dr. Paul Goddard who was giving a lecture at one of our program functions many years ago, and he said, to the extent that we try to control our children, we lose our influence over them. So you kind of have to let go of control of them. And so many times we threaten boundaries or set boundaries in the hopes that the other person will change. That's really the work, guys. It's changing from I can't control you. I'm not going to make that my project anymore. And I'm going to take care of myself. That's all I can do. And that psychological shift demonstrates individuation for you first and invites them to figure out their life. That's been a saying of mine this last year. It is their life to live. When my daughter came to me asking me if she could use marijuana recreationally, and I said I'm not willing to do that, my young teenage daughter, and she said very tenderly, I don't know if I can be happy. And I said very tenderly back, I understand, and that's going to be something you're going to have to figure out. When my children have struggled, especially in the last couple of years, I've been thinking about this. I practice the mantra inside of my head that it's theirs to figure out. I will listen all day to a child's complaints about their parents as a therapist. I'll listen to their pain, to their hurt, to their frustration at their parents' lack of maturity, lack of insight, lack of skills, defensiveness. The list can go on quite long for me. And I'll listen and validate that. But in essence, the validation says, yeah, your parents are flawed human beings. What are you going to do about it? And that's the idea. So, what's the ingredient or one of the key ingredients to effectively eliciting change in your child? It is not trying to change your child, but trying to change you. I haven't quoted this next quote in 15 years. In fact, I'm going to try to recall it. It just came to my mind. And it was from the Step Parenting Manual, Step Parenting Education Process, which stood for Systematic Training and Effective Parenting. And it said basically, healthy parents don't try to control children, they try to control themselves. So you have to let go. You have to surrender if you're going to follow this way of thinking. And one last thing I want to say that I haven't said in quite some time. If we're talking together, and I guess in this format where we're sort of talking together, you're typing in and sending in questions and I'm responding, and I give you a bunch of ideas, that's for you, not for them. A lot of what I say is similar to the idea of giving you a mantra to carry around in your head, but never necessarily to speak it out loud. Because when we speak it out loud, again, we're trying to change them. We nag, we plead, we threaten, we debate, we argue, we intimidate. We do everything that we can in our lives, not just with our children, in our lives to change other people. Because if we do change them, we don't have to do the harder work, which is to change ourselves, to manage our own anxiety when we're standing alone on our own 2 feet and saying no. So you're on the right track. It's a heartbreaking story. I know this. I say this all the time. If you listen to any of my podcasts, I'm sure you hear this. We all dent our children, and we were dented by our parents, and that could go on and on and on. But now the dents are theirs, and theirs to work out. And yes, if you were in family therapy and you were up for it, and the child could express it articulately, I would encourage you to listen, to let them get it off their chest, to let them get it out there. But in essence, by just validating, not arguing, not trying to get them to see it from your perspective, which is essentially kind of a form of gaslighting, not try to convince them that your way of thinking, your decision, your boundary is validated by the latest research or Dr. Brad Reedy or whomever. By not doing any of that, you're saying to them, I feel your pain. And then the thing that you don't say that's implied is, what are you going to do about that pain? And right now, she apparently has a compulsion to lash out at other people when she's feeling hurt. And people that do that end up in jail. People that become violent because they're suffering and in pain end up in jail. So she's going to have to figure that out. And it's going to be heart wrenching. And what I would say to you is keep going, all of you, keep going. But you don't have to do it alone. You can get a therapist that you trust. If you can't find that, if that's unavailable for you, you can go to the 12-step support groups that I mentioned at the end of every single broadcast. Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, ACOA, Refuge Recovery, and even NAMI.org. You can go to those places that have free support and a community that can buoy you up when it feels hopeless and tragic and sad for you, as it will for any parent at times in their life. So thanks for the question. And again, I'm sorry that you're going through it. It speaks to the heart of what so many of our questions are. Somebody said, oh, this is another two-parter. Somebody writes, this is the opposite of the question you usually get. Will my child ever apologize? My question is, how should parents react to an apology from their child? My young adult recently made an apology to me for the way she behaved years ago when they were struggling with addiction. They had just seen their past behaviors reflected in another person. They said they hadn't been able to see how those behaviors affected others, and when they themselves were using substances. I said, I know you were not yourself then. They apologized again and thanked me for my support. I apologized for my own mistake of trying to control them when they were struggling with addiction. I said that in my own struggles with guilt, I'm trying to find compassion with myself by understanding the reasons I do what I do. I guess it was hard for me to just hold space for them when they were feeling guilty. I never explicitly said, thank you for your apology. I stopped wanting or needing an apology a long time ago, but did I miss an opportunity to hear and validate my child's needs to make amends? It's a great question, and you're right. It kind of runs counter to the question that I get asked most of the time. First of all, nearly everything you said demonstrates how much work that you've been doing. I can see, I can feel your work in your question. So I'll just give you my take on it. Maybe just the tail end of your questions is what I would want to comment on. I think it's okay to say thank you for your apology. I appreciate it. For me, when somebody who has hurt me or wronged me and I've already gone through the work of forgiveness for them, like it sounds like you have, I'll often say to them, I don't really need it, but thank you. I know it comes from a place of love and wanting to make amends. And you can just validate it. In fact, one of the things that actually this is a kind of a cool idea for all of you. when somebody apologizes for being late or talking over you or just a friend or a spouse, instead of saying, "Don't worry about it," or "It's no big deal," which is, I think, most, it's probably the most common response that we give when somebody apologizes. We can just say thank you. And when you say thank you to somebody's apology, they can feel the weight that you're giving their apology, the honor that you're giving to their apology. I know it's not exactly the same thing, and you might have heard me tell the story before because I know who this is, and I know you're a regular listener. But years ago, when my mother said, when she came up to my brother and I after I just finished a talk on parenting that she sat in on to a large group, and she came in and said, "I think I might need to recognize how I've hurt you boys. Maybe I should feel bad," she said. And I said, I don't need you to feel bad. I don't need that. But it would be nice if you could see what you did, for sure, especially for my brother. I've been in therapy a long time, him not so much. And it'd be a nice gift for him. So, in fact, my post tomorrow on social media is about forgiveness and about the kind of forgiveness, what motivates us to ask for forgiveness from other people. So you can look forward to that. But I think you've got most of the work, and I think the way you responded was more than adequate. And maybe the only thing I would just add to it, and that we could all incorporate this more in our life, myself included, is when somebody apologizes, we can just say thank you. Thanks, I appreciate it. It tells them that you're absorbing it. And in a subtle way, it says, yeah, that was hurtful, or I was sad. Or I did feel like you weren't attending or considering my needs in this instance or circumstance. But I love the way that you said that you'd forgiven her a long time ago. And I also know that a lot of children carry a great deal of shame. I was just telling somebody today, in fact, I'm going to make this recommendation to this group. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Mission with Robert De Niro, Jeremy Irons, and Liam Neeson. I think it came out in 1986 or 7. It may have won Best Picture. I know it was nominated, and I'm sure it won Best soundtrack because it's an absolutely sublime soundtrack. If you just go to that on your music device and download the soundtrack from The Mission, you'll know what I mean immediately. You'll probably recognize it. It's a beautiful and sublime movie that talks about forgiveness, really self forgiveness, and self forgiveness is it's just so underrated. If we can be kind and compassionate to ourselves, which is terrifying for most people. We're terrified of kindness and compassion towards ourselves because we've been conditioned, which is just a euphemism for kind of brainwashed, to believe that if we aren't hard on ourselves, that we won't do anything right. We won't get out of bed in the morning and do our job. And we were taught that because our parents before us were taught that too. And that goes on and on and on. But the most ironic thing is that compassion is the necessary precursor to healing. And when we don't forgive ourselves, you know what it looks like when we don't forgive ourselves? It looks like us trying to control what other people feel. Try to get them to not be mad or to forgive us. But when we do the difficult work of forgiveness of self, then we can let people be mad at us. That's the great gift. And perhaps, like my daughter said, like she wrote a couple of years ago, the greatest gift that a parent can give to a child is a willingness to be cast as the villain in the child's story. We can let others be mad at when we've made peace with ourselves. When we've learned to love our horrible, rotten self, nobody can use it against us because there's no fight in us anymore. We're not in disagreement with the people that are accusing us of being buffoons or idiots or human or fallible. And not only have we become aware of that, but we have some compassion and patience for it. And I just want to be clear before I leave this topic. This is really important. When I'm talking about this and teaching about this is so important. I'm not over this. My last therapy session may have been the one before the last, either the last one or the one before, a week or two ago. My last session, as I was telling my therapist about something I'd done with one of my children, that I'd snapped at her. I told that story a bunch. After listening to me share my process, even my epiphany that I had after a discussion with my daughter, my therapist just said, after 23 years, she said, "Wow, you're really hard on yourself." 23 years. And I realized I really am. I really am conditioned to punish myself. So when I teach you this, I'm not teaching it from a place of having arrived. I'm teaching you from a place of this is our project. This is my project. This is my practice. And the hope comes not from the arrival. In fact, the arrival is dangerous and devastating because then you've learned all there is to learn. But the hope comes from the direction that you're heading. And you know what that's like. You make a healthy change in your diet, you quit smoking, you commit to reading more, whatever it is. And it's not like you change from one day to the next and become a different person, but immediately your outlook on life changes. You have a more positive, hopeful outlook, not because you've arrived at the health or the learning that you're aspiring to, but because you're heading that way. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. Thank you. All right. Somebody writes, our son just began wilderness 1 week ago. He is open and saying all the right things, acknowledging his problems. How do you know or determine if it's right after wilderness for a young man to return home or to go to a boarding school? I know we are so early on in the process. I always tell parents, especially when clients are saying all the right things early on, I invite a kind of a we'll see. Is it real? Is it really deep change? The answer is it's not, by the way. That's the answer. The change is in the practice, is in the time. The minute I signed up for my first marathon, the minute I signed up for my first Ironman triathlon, and I was committed to those things. I finished both of those and many more. Wasn't the minute to congratulate me for my accomplishment. And the test came, I just told my daughter this last night as we were driving the snow. The test wasn't on race day. Race day was just going to be the evidence of what I'd done prior to that point. In fact, the race day is the most fun. When people retire from professional sports, they say they miss the camaraderie, number one, and number two, they miss the games. But the test comes on a Tuesday morning when it's raining at 5 a.m. and I have to go down to the local high school track and run timed runs for myself, intervals. It's when I don't feel motivated and I have to go to the gym at the end of a long day because I couldn't get it in the morning. I remember I was training with my first Ironman with a neighbor and friend of mine, and a few weeks prior we did a three quarters of an Ironman for our training on Saturday. Three quarters of 2.44 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile run. We did 75-80% of that. And I remember after finishing the swim in the morning, that's what we did first. My training partner said, "This is the best I've ever felt at this point in the race." He didn't say at this point in the training. He said at this point in the race. And it hit me. That's the race. It's the practice. It's the daily discipline. It's getting back up. I've learned a lot lately as a father that it's not about getting it right every time, although I strive and hope to learn and grow and be free of my wounds, to heal, to know, and thus be a better, father and husband to my family, person in the world. Those are my aspirations. But the real strength is when I do fall down, I get back up. I'm accountable. I can own my mistake. I can apologize, and I stay available for the repair. And recently, after making a very common mistake, I remember telling my wife after feeling the guilt and shame of the mistake, I said, I just want to go away and start a new life somewhere as a short order cook somewhere, or get a cabin in the mountains and get away so I stop hurting the people that I love, because I can't not show up at times compromised for the people that I love. And right as I said it, I heard it and I thought, but that's how you're going to do it different than your parents, especially your father, is you're going to show up again tomorrow. Because if the child's anger and hurt triggers or causes us to run away and hide in the mountains, metaphorically or literally, of course, they were right all along to be afraid to tell us. They were right all along to assess that we were too fragile to tell us the truth or to share their feelings with us. So we do this work so that we can be available for the repair as much as getting it right in the first place. And our children learn. Just think about this, mom and dad. Think about this. Our children learn by watching how we repair, make amends, and rebound from a mistake. And they learn from us in that moment what it means to be a human. I had a teacher apologize and to take accountability for something she had said to my child. She called me, the teacher called me and my wife to let us know that our child was being disruptive. And then after going through the process, she acknowledged that she had made a mistake in the process also, and she apologized on the phone with all of us there, including my daughter, which I praised her and thanked her effusively. And she said, I'm glad to hear that because a lot of parents would use this against me. And I said, not in this house. And you taught my daughter something more important than the subject you were teaching her at that time in school, how to be human. We want our children to be able to pick themselves up after they fall because everybody's going to fall a lot. Thanks for the question. My 16-year-old daughter with developmental trauma from relinquishment adoption, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and some cognitive difficulties has been in treatment, wilderness therapy, and now a residential treatment center for about 18 months. I expect she will return home. I expect that she will return home after her current school year. I'm considering engaging Evoke for a family intensive after the residential treatment center as part of this major transition. My primary reason for considering an intensive is that while the overall RTC program has helped us a lot, the quality of the therapy has not been that great. I think that since leaving Wilderness summer of 2021, my daughter has gotten often somewhat out of practice of dipping into the deeper emotions, and that an intensive might help us both do some deeper relationship work and repair. I wonder if you can speak to the wisdom, or I suppose the lack of wisdom, in this idea. I have two thoughts about it. Therapy is really difficult to do. It's not easy, and I'm grateful that it's not easy because it gives me something to work on for the rest of my life. My 80-something-year-old therapist would tell you the same thing. In my opinion, my vantage point, she's a genius as a therapist. Having said that, she tells me how much she's learning every day, how she's still learning new things about therapy. I lost count of the number of books that she's written. It's probably somewhere around 30, maybe a few more or a few after. And the writing is rich and coming quickly, even at this time of her life. I believe in part because she's still learning so much from it. So the fact that sometimes the therapeutic experience that you're experiencing might not be at the highest level, it's not a fantasy. It's not a fantasy. There's some therapy that's better than others, and I'm proud of our attachment model, and so I think it's a great opportunity to solidify and come together. When I've had young people come with their parents, I will tell you this: most often, when young people come with their parents, they will say that this, even compared to all of their treatment for months and in some cases years, they will say that they've never felt so heard as what they felt at an intensive. And what the parents will say is that they came oftentimes maybe for a hope that it would benefit the child more. You said both of you in your question, but maybe unconsciously the parent will come thinking, this is really for the child. And what the parent says is, I realize I have some participation at a deeper level. I can see it and feel it. So I'm a fan of it, but I'm going to make one qualification for all of you. I'm going to make one qualification. This is going to be tough for me to say. I don't even know if this is a good business model or not, what I'm about to say. If you're open to the idea of a family intensive, I would encourage you strongly to come to a Finding You. This is going to be odd for you, I think. I don't go to family therapy very often. I have been to a handful of family therapy sessions in the last 10 years, maybe 5 if I'm being generous. I don't go to couples therapy. Since 2010, I've been to 5 at the most. But every single session that I do with my therapist, which is once a week, 11 o'clock Mountain Time on Fridays, every session that I participate in is for my marriage. It's for myself, of course. It's for my marriage and for my parenting. And yes, I believe in family therapy, and I did a lot more when I and my children were younger. It can help bridge, create a bridge of a common language, of shared ideas, something like the 3 circles that we teach. It can do some of that. But I would strongly encourage you to consider a Finding You before a private family intensive. And we also have that couples intensive coming up in February. First time ever, multi-couple session. If you want to do some healing alongside of your partner, that could be a great place to do it. And not only do I believe that because it all starts the relationship we have with ourselves, I really believe that the quality of the relationship we have with ourselves is the anchor, right? The cornerstone. In architecture, the cornerstone is the thing that is laid that everything else lines up with. Everything else makes reference to. That the relationship we have with ourselves and the quality of it is the predictor of the relationship we have with everybody else. Like Carl Jung said, it's become a mainstream quote. If you want to understand somebody else's darkness, in other words, somebody else's mental health and mental illness, get to know your own. So yes, it's a great thing. If you could do both, great. If you had to choose one, again, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would tell you. So I don't even. This is just the right thing to tell you. That's why I bring that up. Go and do your own. Do your own work first. And that will become the cornerstone. And anything you do in family therapy or family intensives after that will be fueled by the work that you've done yourself. I think you can often get a lot deeper in individual work than you can in family systems work. And I'm a family systems therapist. I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. But remember this, one of the founders of marriage and family therapy, Murray Bowen, never saw 2 people at the same time. So it's not about that we're intervening at the family level, but we think in terms of systems, right? We understand how how relationships impact people. We understand proximity, boundaries, or lack of them. We understand codependency, which happens in relationship to others. But we're going down, I believe this, to a deeper place. So maybe that's not the answer that you wanted to hear, but that's the truth. Becky, who's moderating for me this evening, she does the admits, the enrollments for all of our intensive program. And I tell her all the time, when somebody comes, ask them to at least consider the possibility of doing an individual intensive instead or before they do a couples intensive or a family intensive. So I believe in that. Somebody writes, my 20-year-old son came home in July from being in treatment for addiction and depression for about 6 months and has been in and out of sober living, relapsing about 5 times. He now wants us to pay for him to go to college in January and is excited and motivated to stay sober by a sense of purpose. He has been depressed and lacking in purpose for so long and we want to support him in this. Although we are worried he might relapse and sabotage himself again. He says if he has to wait to the next entry time for school, which is in July, he's worried that he will use again before then. Any thoughts on how to respond? How do we support his goals and show we believe in him? It feels a little bit like we are damned if we do and damned if we don't. Well, you are. Remember, you can't win, but you can choose how to lose. That is a core mantra of mine that I repeat every day, all the time. You cannot win. You can only choose how to lose. But I think the simple answer is make him take out some loans for school. And if he graduates, you'll pay them back. If you have the ability and the willingness to support him, make him take out school loans. And then if he passes the classes, goes to class and passes, you can pay him back. That's simple. You put him on the hook. You get some skin in the game from him, and then you reward him at the end. It's kind of a simple solution. If there's, I hope there's enough time to get this done. But again, also, I like his wisdom of urgency, but that's also the way that addicts think. That's the addictive thinking. Has to be now. It's immediate. It has to go this way. I know his recovery is tenuous and new, and I respect that. But there's a little bit in the story in the ask that you're sharing with me that feels like a little bit of pressure. And this idea about supporting him, it's complicated. I don't know that I would say it's your primary job to believe in him. I think it's your primary job to attend to your feelings and sense of things. In some ways, believing somebody who's relapsed a half a dozen times is maybe unwise. It's okay to be skeptical. People in recovery can handle skepticism. What I would encourage instead of believing in him or not is take a step back, adopt the we'll see. I remember one of those family therapy sessions I was in that I mentioned that I went to with my now 20-year-old a couple of years ago. We sat down and he seemed to think that the goal was to give us an accounting of how he was doing in various areas in his life. And I said, that's not what I'm here for. This isn't a time for you to let us know all the things that you're doing or not. In fact, I think it might ruin it. That's not my focus. If you're going to do that, then I got to go next, and my wife needs to go after that. And we need to talk about what we're still working on and what we're just about ready to do. It's not about what I think. It's not about making me happy. That's the poison, not the cure. We can be nurturing and kind and encouraging. One last idea about believing in your child. This is a nuanced idea that I talk about sometimes. I'll use my 14-year-old. She'll be 15 in 10 days. The 15-year anniversary, by the way. It was on the date of her birth that I did my first webinar broadcast. 15 years, once a week or twice a week for 15 years. And I believe in her. I believe she's going to figure it out. But I believe there's going to be some stuff. I believe there's going to be some zigzags and left turns and turnarounds and fender benders along the way. Yes, I believe in her ability to figure out her life. But that doesn't mean that I think it's going to go smoothly and without failures. So you can believe in your son and say, I believe you'll figure it out. I'm hopeful and I believe that you'll figure it out. But that's not the same thing as saying it'll all go well. Sometimes when therapists say, give them some rope. I think parents say, well, oh, the therapist told me if I give them some rope, that'll work. In other words, what the parent hears, if I trust them, then the child will make good decisions. That's not how it works. You trust them because you have enough distance and detachment, perspective, that you see the long arc of somebody's life. And I do believe that that's a healthy, helpful perspective. Distance, take a step back. Take a we'll wait and see. Work on your own daily recovery. Work on your own anxiety, your own mental health issues. Don't stay wrapped up and waiting for them. When I ask parents how they're doing, and they start describing how their child is doing, I say, I didn't ask how your child was doing. How are you doing? Some of that story of your child, of course, relates to how you're doing, but that's not the same thing. So those are my thoughts about that. Are there any other questions, Becky, that have come in? No more questions remaining? All right. I'll give one last go before I close. I'll just go through the upcoming events. Like I mentioned, February 1st through 5th, multi-couple intensives. It's a lot like a Finding You, only we're allowing couples to come. If you want to sit shoulder to shoulder with your partner and see them do their work, I talk about this idea that to fall in love with your spouse or your partner is to fall in love with their dilemma. And by the way, as those of you who have been to a Finding You know, when somebody shares their dilemma with you, it is compelling and it evokes compassion, right? You see past the defense, and all there is love. So if you're able to work together, this is not for couples who are in acute conflict or maybe on the brink of divorce. It's not for those couples, but the couples who have typical ups and downs of marriage and want to come together and want to witness each other's work. When I can be in touch with my wife's dilemma, I have compassion. When I pay attention to her defenses, I get angry and impatient. So multi-couples intensive, February 1st to 5th. I don't know if I've said this to you before, but when we first started our intensive programs in 2015, this was the one that I was looking forward to the most. But folks didn't want to come with another couple. They thought there'd be some loss because time would be focused on other people. But listen to me. You learn as much by watching other people work, and that'll be true for couples. I'm sure of it. You learn as much by watching and witnessing somebody else's work as you do from your own. So multi-couples intensive, February 1st through 5th. And by the way, I am running that. On February 24th, we have the Conscious Parenting Workshop, all-day workshop, which I mentioned. And then I'll be announcing the date for the masterclass on attachment-based therapy, which will coincide with my new book that'll be coming out next year. My fourth book. My third book should come out earlier. My fourth book will come out in late spring, and that'll be a manual on attachment-based therapy. My first two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. I narrated The Audacity to Be You. If you want to do a deep dive into your own work, Finding You is the place to go. January 18th through 22nd is our next offering. February 22nd after that. They're starting to fill up in advance. I happen to be running the one on January 18th. There's one more spot, I believe, left. And there's a very good chance it'll be the only Finding You that I will run all year long. In fact, it's going to be me and my daughter, Emma. It'll be the first one we run together, the first Finding You we've run together in years. Because both of us are typically the ones who do the training, but we wanted to work together in the first of the year. So January 18th through 22nd, there's a spot left. So if you want to do it, it will fill up for sure. January 27th through 29th, there's an online offering for Finding You. It's about half the time and about a third of the cost. And of course, you don't have to travel. So if resources are an issue for you, time and money, the online Finding You is wonderful. We started them during the pandemic, and I was skeptical myself, and I was blown away at the amount of work that could be done online. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information or to register. We have support groups for wilderness families and alumni. December 15th is the next offering. Some of these broadcasts do conflict with those. I want to remind you. If that happens, I encourage you to attend the support group if that's something you need, and then watch or listen to this recorded. December 15th is our next offering for wilderness current and alumni families. Once a month, we have an alumni-only meeting for wilderness families. December 27th, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time is the next offering for the alumni only. And then we have an intensive support group once a month. December 13th at 6 p.m. is our next offering. Contact me, Malia at evoketherapy.com. If you want an attachment-trained coach, we have those at Evoke. Contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. That's individuals, couples, families, parenting. You can do it virtually. It's very convenient. We have Pursuits of Venture Trips, Think Therapy Light or Sober Fun for young adults or adults and families. Like I mentioned earlier, we ask you to try 6 12-step support groups. Any combination of alanon Families Anonymous, or adultchildren.org. We recommend 6 because that's what they recommend. They just want you to try them on to see if it fits. You can also go to refugerecovery.org or NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, for classes, resources, and support in your local community that is free. All of these broadcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You in Evoke Therapy Podcast or go to soundcloud.com on your computer. You can also watch these. The video replays of these are stored on our YouTube channel. Just go to Evoke's YouTube channel. You can find Evoke Therapy Programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handles at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy. And you can find Evoke Intensives on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching either Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensive. And also our blog has wonderful content each week. It's nearing the end of the year. It's the holiday season. If you want to get back to people that can't, so that people that can't afford treatment can get it, our partners that we partnered with and match donations, or match scholarship funds with, are choosementalhealth.org, sky'sthelimitfund.org, and the Evoke Family Foundation.org. My next broadcast will be December 13th. I'll be talking about couples work and co-parenting. Looking forward to that. Love that topic. All right. Looks like no new questions have come in. Thank you for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for and on behalf of the people that love you and the people that you love. Thanks for coming on and willing to do your work. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.